Hey, it's Chris, and today I'm back with the review that I promised when I unboxed the Kensington StudioDock, which starts at $379 and is absolutely one of the most unique and useful iPad accessories to ever exist. If you've ever wished that your USB-C iPad Air or iPad Pro could function more like a desktop computer, then this is the device for you. Although I kind of feel like a lot of people out there have misunderstood it. See, here's the big revelation. You shouldn't be thinking about this like a single iPad accessory because it's really 3-in-1. It's a stand, it's a dock, and it's a charging system. Considering 12 South's Hoverbar Duo stand costs $80 and isn't nearly as stable, the Hyperdrive 9-in-1 dock costs $100 and can't be tucked out of the way, and the Mophie 4-in-1 wireless charging mat is $150 and has a larger footprint, the StudioDock's admittedly high price tag isn't quite as outrageous as I think it might have at first seemed. The real question is, of course, is it worth spending the money? And by the end of this video, you will walk away with a definitive answer. And to be honest, I think some people's minds might get changed. Now, if, like me, you love the iPad's Magic Keyboard for its truly incredible typing experience, you might be torn between which ultra expensive, ultra pro iPad accessory is gonna give you the most bang for your buck between the StudioDock and the Magic Keyboard. Well, they're meant for vastly different purposes, but it's a theme we're gonna touch on throughout the video. So let's get started by talking about workflows and what the StudioDock is actually like to use. Let me start by saying, I feel like pairing your iPad with the StudioDock is akin to giving your iPad superpowers. It almost feels like you're using a completely new or different device. And as the pictures on the website kind of depict, this does make your iPad feel more like a desktop computer. Not just because of the super cool aesthetic or the Pro Display XDR-like vibes that it gives off, but also because you kind of feel like you're working at an iMac Mini of sorts, especially by the time you end up adding in your favorite external keyboard and mouse. So web surfing, media consumption, multitasking, just general computing, it all feels as good as it gets on iPadOS on the StudioDock. I love, with a capital L, how easy and quick and smooth it is to rotate from horizontal to vertical orientation, which is the way that I prefer to read and write long articles. But of course, an enormous part of the iPad experience is using the Apple Pencil in combination with the paper-like screen protector for an absolutely astonishing and best-in-class iPad stylus experience. So how much of a pain is it, in reality, to dock and undock your iPad for a sketching or handwriting experience? Well, actually, it's really easy. It's not hard at all. In fact, what I love here is that it's so easy to take this off of the stand and plop it down on the desk next to you for a true tablet-like experience. Now here's something that's kind of interesting though, and I kind of scoffed at this at first, but if I dock the iPad into the Kensington StudioDock, I can actually come in here and use the Apple Pencil. I can actually come in here and use the Apple Pencil while it's still docked. And you know what? It's actually pretty stable, very stable. Now, I did test integrating this with my Mac setup. Specifically, I'm talking about Sidecar, and it is awesome, as you can imagine, especially if you use a keyboard and a mouse combo that pair with two different devices for easy switching between Mac and iPad primary tasks. But ultimately, the StudioDock is just massive overkill if you're only looking for a Sidecar stand. Now, the Magic Keyboard and the StudioDock are both very expensive. They have that in common, but the workflows are significantly different for each. Obviously, the Magic Keyboard is more geared towards mobility, portability, and it comes with a keyboard and a trackpad. It's all built in there. Whereas the StudioDock is more desk-bound, and you're gonna have to add in that keyboard and the mouse. On a quick side note, if you've been enjoying this video, take this opportunity to hit that subscribe button because I'm gonna be covering all the new iPads this year, as well as all the changes coming to iPadOS at WWDC. And if you don't want to miss that thorough and in-depth coverage, you've got to get subscribed because I don't want you to miss out. And I'm probably going to have more iPad content than most of the other Apple-related channels out there. Now, purely as an iPad stand, the Kensington dock is my current reigning favorite for one very simple reason. It gets the iPad higher and closer to my face. So whereas with the Magic Keyboard, I'm actually gonna be staring down closer to the desk to focus on my work, the StudioDock lets me actually rest my gaze where it would more naturally fall anyways, which is very enjoyable. And as you can imagine, the height and the adjustability of the StudioDock make this an absolutely incredible FaceTime or Zoom meeting companion. Now the base of the StudioDock is very heavy and quite substantial, which comes in handy when you're docking and undocking your iPad. Why? Because it doesn't move and shift all over the desk. Now you can actually contrast that with 12 South's Hoverbar Duo, which isn't quite as heavy and substantial and tends to wiggle and wobble around a little bit when you're taking the iPad off or putting it back on, or when you're touching the screen. When you touch the screen here, it's not wiggling, it's not wobbling, it's not going anywhere. And then of course, there's the aluminum look, the aluminum build, which actually looks like a proper Apple accessory, which is another way of saying it just looks really freaking good. The docking capabilities here, those extra connections around the back and the side, are really what set this apart from other iPad accessories. The docking setup here is really where a lot of that extra utility, the usefulness actually comes into play. So you've got an Ethernet port, 3 USB-As, an HDMI, a headphone jack, and a USB-C. But what's been most useful to me personally, as I've been using this and testing it, have been the USB-C on the side and that SD card reader. Having a really fast connection from my external hard drive is really great, and importing a batch of photos off my Sony Alpha is just a breeze here. Now, if in the future, hopefully the near future, Apple comes out with a more robust iPad OS that can fully support an external display, kind of similar to how a Mac does, then you're really gonna end up appreciating that HDMI port. As it is right now, it feels really limited, not because of the StudioDock, just because of the low number of apps that support full screen integration. And then I've seen a lot of comments swirling around saying, why would you need that Gigabit Ethernet port there? Well, the thing is, some people need a stable internet connection for their work, for what they're working on. Can't be dropping out. And for those people, that is a port that's gonna come in clutch. So all of the I/O and the ports, except for the two that I wouldn't want to be in the back, the SD card reader and that USB-C, are all located in the back, which means all of the cords are then flowing out the back, down the back of your desk, and it really keeps the visual cord clutter to a minimum when you're sitting in front of this thing. Now, if you do end up spending your money on a Magic Keyboard instead of the StudioDock, then you're gonna be stuck with some kind of a dongle situation, most likely, and that's just not ideal. So the Kensington StudioDock is a great iPad stand, and it is a great dock, but it's also a great multi-device charger. And when I say multi-device, I mean multi-device. See, most people notice this Qi wireless charging area at the base, which, don't get me wrong, is great. Lets you charge your iPhone and some AirPods, although these aren't AirPods, in a nice and compact area. But don't overlook the fact that the StudioDock is a quick charger for your iPad itself, which is nothing to sneeze at. Now, on top of that, you can charge like 90% of what you could buy at an Apple store here by plugging in this optional Apple Watch charger in the USB-C port over here, which I usually keep detached because it just kind of adds some extra bulk there when it's not in use. But this is one thing I didn't think I'd actually end up having a use for, ever. But it turns out, since I track my sleep with my Apple Watch, I never actually get to fully charge it overnight, and I just end up charging it a little bit when I'm getting ready in the morning and a little bit before I go to bed. So oftentimes, as I'm approaching the end of the workday, my Apple Watch battery is getting pretty low. I get that 10% battery warning, and it's actually nice to be able to just pop it on here and get it charging. All right, let's get to the point. Let's talk about money. Is this something you should spend money on? Now, you remember those 3 accessories that I mentioned at the beginning? There was a wireless charger, there was a stand, and there was a dock that you could purchase separately. If you purchase those all together, that would come out to about $330, which is only like $50 or so cheaper than the cheapest version of the StudioDock. So is it worth paying approximately $50 extra for a fully integrated solution like the StudioDock versus having a bunch of separate accessories? Well, if you value decluttering your workspace, having a solid and highly adjustable stand that places the iPad closer to where your gaze naturally falls, or if you're as serious as it gets about making the iPad your one and only computer, desktop or otherwise, then you might want to go ahead and spend the money. On the other hand, I would say save your money if you already own a combination of a stand, a dock, and charging setup that works good for you. Also, save your money if you're just eyeballing this as a sidecar only stand. Really not worth it. Super overkill. Unless you just have money to burn. Now getting back to the Magic Keyboard, if you have an iPad or are getting one and you have $350 to $400 to spend on an accessory, I think most people are gonna end up going with the Magic Keyboard simply because it is portable, so it's not just confined to one area like your desk, and it has the essentials baked in. Namely, I'm talking about the stand, the keyboard, and a trackpad. On the other hand, if you're somebody who is iPad first, you wanna make the iPad work as your only computer basically, and you don't mind being tethered mostly to the desk, there is a group of people out there who are going to fall in love with the StudioDock. As it stands, I don't think I could call this a must-have accessory right now. Namely because anything that you can do with the StudioDock, you could do with a number of other separate accessories. You could do the same work. But this is a really, really fun accessory to use, and it is genuinely useful for that iPad first crowd. And let me tell you, nothing destroys desktop clutter like the StudioDock. The key word here, I think, to summarize, is convenience. And if you can come up with a reason to justify the expense, you will not be disappointed. All right, if you enjoyed this very thorough review of the Kensington StudioDock and you'd like to see more very thorough iPad reviews and unboxings and apps and thoughts and tips, all kinds of iPad videos, then make sure to get yourself subscribed because there's a lot coming up and there's a lot on the channel already. You can go back and explore. Thanks for watching today, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.